Have you ever wondered how your morning cup of joe is made? If you're like most people, you'll be using a standard drip coffee machine. Even for a simple mechanical design like this, there's greater fluids magic at work. Drip coffee machines consist of a few main components. The reservoir holds the water to be brewed and is connected to the spout through an aluminum tube that contains the water. The heating element is connected to the bottom portion of the tube and is responsible for heating the water to its boiling point. A one-way valve ensures that the water being heated does not enter back into the reservoir. The water enters the tube and is heated to boiling, rising up through the spout and onto the coffee grounds. In our analysis of this system, we first make a few assumptions. First, we assume the system is quasi-1D, meaning we ignore the curve in the tube. We also assume that the tube diameter is constant, ignoring any imperfections. We assume laminar flow, as the tube diameter is small enough to discount any turbulence in the boiling water. Finally, we assume that the amount of water needed for a typical cup of coffee is 8 ounces. A common misconception in the inner workings of a coffee machine is that the water does not boil and flows through with thermal expansion alone. However, if we calculate thermal expansion using a 70 degrees Celsius change, it comes out to a height difference in the liquid of about 3.425 millimeters that is pushed out, and that's assuming that the tube was completely full to begin with. This height will decrease as the water level in the reservoir decreases, meaning eventually thermal expansion alone will not be enough to force liquid out of the top of the tube.
So how does it actually work? To begin, the heating element of the coffee maker raises the temperature of the water to its boiling point, introducing a two-phase flow of liquid and vapor that flows from the reservoir through the spout. We can use conservation of mass to analyze how the flow moves through the tube. Taking a control volume to be the portion of the tube that is attached to the heating element, we see the density of the total fluid decreases at boiling, as vapor has a much lower density than water. However, since total mass must remain constant, the volume the fluid takes up must increase to account for the density change. As a check valve prohibits water flowing back into the reservoir, the two-phase fluid must flow up towards the spout. How does the fluid in the tube travel upwards? Bubbles flow up within fluid due to Archimedes' principle, which states that an object experiences an upwards buoyancy force equal to the weight of the fluid that it displaces. As a bubble is submerged, in order to reach equilibrium, the buoyancy force must equal the volume of the object. The buoyancy force felt by the bubble will be greater than the volume of the bubble, so there is a net upwards acceleration. Some bubbles generated will have a diameter that is about the same as the inside of the tube, resulting in sections of water interrupted by sections of vapor, known as slug flow. As the bubble moves up through the liquid, it reaches a point where the column of water above the bubble has a gravitational force less than the upwards buoyancy force on the bubble. Using force balance to equate the buoyancy to the gravitational force, we find the height of the fluid that is able to be pushed upwards to be about 5 millimeters. The bubble will continue to move up along the tube, taking with it the small amount of fluid that travels out of the spout, resulting in a drip. At a certain point, the bubble goes above the line of fluid in the tube, yet it is still able to travel upward instead of dispersing in air. To understand why this is possible, we look at the size of the tube, where the surface tension of the water results in adhesion to the tube walls. It also results in cohesion to the water traveling above the bubble. The capillary number of a fluid is a dimensionless value that represents viscous effects versus surface tension forces. Because the viscosity and velocity of this fluid are relatively low, the capillary number is low, meaning that the flow is dominated by surface tension. Because of this, the water above the bubble does not slip through the sides.
Taking the average time to make an 8-ounce cup of coffee to be 30 seconds, for a cross-sectional tube area of 38.5 millimeters squared, we get an average speed of the fluid to be about 0.2 meters per second. Using a range of values that account for the uncertainties in this velocity, we calculate the resulting range of Reynolds numbers that work for the system to be around 1050 to 1750. The Reynolds number and the value of this viscous dissipation factor directly influence the viscous losses experienced by the system, which is signified by the change in the Bernoulli constant. The Bernoulli constant is proportional to the potential energy per unit volume at maximum height when velocity is equal to 0. A larger viscous dissipation factor will result in a larger decrease in the Bernoulli constant, causing a low potential energy. This potential energy constraint limits the maximum height the water can reach in a tube, informing the length of the tube in this design. For the system to work smoothly, we need to minimize the viscous losses. The surface of the tube can't be rough, as surface roughness is directly related to viscous dissipation factor, and more work is required for the bubbles to raise the same amount of water up the spout. We also are not able to use very viscous liquids, as the energy needed to push the liquid up the spout will be higher than the bubbles can manage. The diameter of the tube must be optimized so that it is small enough for the size of the bubble to grow to create slug flow and large enough so viscous losses are relatively minimized. As you can see, even a seemingly simple system can have some interesting fluid mechanics supporting its design. Keep that in mind the next time you make your bean juice.